Hello, welcome once again to a new video. This time we will learn about the Perú localization. That by means of an extension, we have developed different tables and functions in each of the modules of Business Central that are going to help us to comply with each of the tax requirements demanded by the Peruvian Tax Authority. The first thing we are going to do is to review initial configurations in terms of tax identification of third parties, including customers and suppliers. Next, we look at the behavior of perceptions, deductions, and withholdings in an operative flow. After that, we make vouchers of these documents. And finally, we see the fiscal reports and reports. Now we go to the purchasing module and enter our supplier master to our supplier master. Our localization has developed different fields in each of these modules. For example, in the supplier master, we are going to find these fields that allow us to identify our suppliers fiscally. For example, the type of identification, if it is a unique taxpayer registry, passport, or other. We also select, or we can include, what would be the identification number. We will also find fields, for example, if it is of a natural person with a business, a corporation, or some type of taxpayer. We will also find fields such as, for example, the type of tax regime. If it is the new single tax regime, if it is the simplified, single simplified. If the supplier is of a general regime and any of these regimes. We will also find the type of person, if it is a natural person or if it is a legal person. We are going to select it. And we are going to find, as a suggestion, we can relate what would be the different withholdings and deductions applied to the supplier. That is to say, I can put the withholding tax of 10%, and when I am executing a purchase document, it suggests the withholding tax of 10%. It suggests me the 10% withholding, even though it is totally modifiable within the document. So from here, I'm going to expand this tab, and here I can create the different withholdings that you want. In this case, by simply placing the withholding tax tag. So, the VAT withholding. For IGV withholding, here we can place and we can create the different withholdings that we want. We can also relate the deduction to our supplier. What this will do is that the amount of the deduction, it will take it to this accounting account that I have identified in this section. And so I can pay the invoice separately from the deduction. These informative fields, we are also going to be able to visualize them in our customer master. Here we are going to enter customers, and we are going to find what would be the type of identification, the number. We are going to find if it is of a type of tax regime, whether it is an individual or a legal entity, the type of taxpayer, and the calculation of the collection, if it is a collection agent or if it is excluded from the collection. This will limit me to the human error of suddenly having an agent of perception or excluded from perception, and I make some, or excluded from collection and I make a sale to this client. He will not let me because it is excluded from collection. And we relate what would be VAT withholding and withholding in the account. Apart from our suppliers and customers, we will find the Peru LLP tab, which we can relate to third parties. These third parties that we need to register in the system and are not in a document of the purchase or sale module, for example. For sale, for example, some journal in general, and we need to relate it. Here we can do it. We will also find the type of document, and other informal data. Now we go to the series. In the series, we have also developed the management of series by user and by branch. That is to say, I can have a series for the sales of City 1 and another series for sales in City 2. That is, I can manage different series by branches and also have a tax authorization for each of these series. Now we are going to generate an operational flow and see the behavior of all these configurations that I have just mentioned. Now I am going to enter the purchase module, a new purchase invoice. I'm going to select the supplier. In this case, our supplier is 10,000. We indicate the invoice number, Demo 02, and we add the items we are going to buy. We select the quantity. In this case, it would be 100. And as a suggestion, he shows me what would be the 10% withholding and the 30% VAT withholding. If I want to modify this percentage, I can do it within this documentation. If the product has, or the additional tax is applied to it, because I can select it from this section. And if we want that the article, whenever we call it, to bring related the additional tax, then we simply enter to the product sheet, and in the additional tax we add the necessary tax that is necessary. That's it. We cancel. That's it. We go down a little in the document and we are going to find what would be the deduction. We simply add the 10% deduction and it calculates the deduction based on the amount. The amount that would be the base plus the tax, and if it had additional tax, also we'll add it to the base. We will indicate register, preview the document, and see the behavior. I indicate no to see the behavior in VAT movements. Here I am going to find what would be the VAT movements. In terms of VAT withholding and withholding tax, identifying the percentage of tax 10% and 3% respectively with the base. In accounting movements, we are going to find what would be the amount of the withholding and deduction associated or related to each of the accounts formed. This is totally parameterizable. That is to say, I tell the system to which accounts I want the amount of the deduction or the withholding to be withholdings to travel. So here I tell it, for example, 10% withholding to account 8889. Also, we see in the third party column how it relates the third party to each of the accounting movements. This is to generate more complex reports and more complex reports. Now we simply instruct you to register. Do you want to register the invoice? I say yes. It automatically makes a calculation of the deduction and says yes, and confirms that you want to record the journal lines. That he wants to record the journal lines. I say yes. Done, and the system is registering the invoice. It has been registered correctly, and I indicate to visualize our purchase invoice. I indicate in search movements, accounting, to see the movements that generated this transaction. Here it is counting the records, and here it shows me first of all the accounting transactions associated with each of the amounts, each of the accounting accounts. So we see that here we are going to find a column that says detractions and mark. Here is the check of the deduction, which would be the amount associated to the accounting account. We see again supplier movements. We can also visualize the deduction. This for when I'm paying this invoice, you can turn off the deduction separately and the separate invoice, or I can turn off the entire invoice including deduction. Now we can not only generate purchase invoices, we can also generate what would be purchase invoices. Purchase invoices. I am going to enter this invoice that I have here, and I am going to indicate a purchase settlement. I select the purchase settlement check, and this invoice automatically becomes a purchase settlement into a purchase settlement. In this case, I am going to delete the deduction because I do not want it to have the deduction. I indicate to register. It is the same process. We can see the movements of associated to each one of the third parties, VAT movements and others. We indicate in the historical of purchase invoices, and we see that this purchase is a purchase liquidation. We can visualize it. We have also developed the purchase debit notes for the purchase module. Okay? And for example, we can display a debit note with each of the necessary information. Debit memos are not a document that brings the Business Central standard. That's why we have developed it. We can include withholdings. We can relate the invoice. In this case, I am going to select this invoice and I'm going to put demo. Debit memo 001. It also has the deduction if we want to apply it. We give it register, I say yes. The system automatically saves the debit note and will have a history of the debit notes recorded, of debit notes registered. That's it. Now we go to our sales module, and enter a sales invoice. We are going to enter a new sale, and here we are going to find also the options for withholdings and so on. We are going to select our customer, for example, this customer, and we are going to find these fields, waybills and internal documents. If I activate the waybill, when I generate the sales invoice, it will generate the waybill. To perform the electronic stamping, we are going to indicate internal document to control these waybills internally with a series. I will select the product, I will select the quantity, and if necessary, the retentions. If we need the withholdings in the document, then we are going to find the withholdings at source, VAT withholding taxes, and the additional tax that you will have in the same contract. We will also find if this sale, a perception will be applied. Here we are going to find the limitation, and it is because the perception and the withholdings cannot coexist. They cannot both be placed in your document. Both. That is why it tells me that it cannot be calculated since the document has active withholdings. So that I can calculate the payment, I have to modify the withholdings. The withholdings, I'm going to add an additional tax of 15%, and now I can add the perception. He is going to calculate the levy taking into account the general tax, the additional tax. We are going to indicate register preview. If we want to add withholdings, we can do it and it will generate the same calculation. We are going to find here what would be the withholding with its basis and the additional tax with its base and amount. The percentage of the tax in this case, the withholding, is 10%. Also, in accounting movements, we are going to find the amount of the invoice distributed in each one of them, of the invoice distributed in each of the accounting accounts. Let us remember that this point is totally parameterizable. That is to say, I tell the system to which accounts, for example, the amount of the deduction will travel, to which account the IGV will travel, and other taxes and withholdings. Let's tell it to register. It is registering the invoice. I indicate yes. It asks me if I want to visualize it. I indicate no. And I'm going to go to our Peru section LLB in the historical referral guides. And we see that we have created the remission guide at the time of generating the sales invoice. What would be the sales invoice? We can generate not only way bills per invoice, by order we can also generate them, and by inventory transfer. That is, when we move our merchandise from one warehouse to another warehouse of our company, we can also generate way bills. Now we are going to generate what would be deduction, perception, and withholding vouchers. We are going to enter our treasury module to the payment journal, General. We are going to select first the supplier. Let's remember that the deduction voucher will be generated automatically when I register the invoice, and it will make a status change when I pay the invoice. I showed them already. Let's select what would be our supplier, the form of payment, and select the document. Here note that we can pay the invoice directly, including the deduction, or if we want to pay, for example, only the deduction. In this case, I will pay only the deduction. This is our deduction. Let's remember that has the column that says detraction. We indicate to accept, and we see the amount, which is 220. We are going to give it to register, and automatically we have paid the deduction independently. And again, I am going to select our supplier, the form of payment, and I'm going to select the document. Here I'm going to organize by date, and we have our invoice 279. Let's select it, and now I can pay the invoice independently. Done. We indicate to accept. Now we are going to indicate customer. We are going to select the client. We are going to indicate him form of payment, bank, and we will call the customer's invoice. The invoice, we indicate to accept. We give it to register before we give a preview, and we can visualize the accounting movements of this payment. Let's click on register. Done. Now we go to the Peru LLB tab, which we are going to find the perceptions, the registered. That is to say, when I generate the payment of the receipt of the sales document that has the receipt, automatically my receipt is created, which I can visualize, indicating to print. Here I can send it to a document that I want. Here I indicate to print, and I indicate preview, and I can visualize the information of the receipt, taking into account the total amount collected and the amount received. Also, if we cancel this payment, the status of our voucher will change to cancelled. Our voucher will change to cancelled. In this way, we keep track of the recorded perceptions. The recorded deductions, automatically when we create the purchase invoice, the deduction voucher is issued. Once I pay the invoice, it is settled. And if, for example, I cancel the payment, the status will be cancelled, the status will be cancelled. If, for example, in issued, I want to visualize, it tells me that the document cannot be printed because it is not settled. The document will only remain, or I can visualize it once it is settled, and I can visualize what it would be. Our deduction voucher and our withholding voucher. In our withholding history, we'll also have the status of settled and cancelled. Let's remember that the withholding and the perception, the voucher is generated once the invoice is fully paid. And the deduction voucher is generated when we issue the invoice. And it will have 3 states. Here in withholding history, we are going to find liquidated status and the cancelled status as well. For example, I'm going to visualize my withholding voucher. Here I will see the details of the invoice, the number of documents, the date, the amount paid, the amount withheld, the date of issue, and informative data. In this way we generate the vouchers. Now we are going to generate the report. We start first with the book, withholding book, and here we can visualize all the withholdings that have been applied. We can set a date range, a range of dates, and also all the reports that I'm going to show you. We can export them to an Excel document with data and design. That is to say, that appears the logo of the company, the information of the company, and an Excel document. That is to say, that appears the logo of the company and the information of the company. Document, only data, which would be a table type. Okay, we are going to enter the withholding book again. We indicate preview to see the print views, and we can visualize what would be the information, the number of identity documents, the type of document, surnames and name, gross amount, withholding made, net amount. Also, we can also visualize the inventory ledger book. Let's enter valued inventory, and we will find the filter by brand. Here we can select the different brands, and we can also filter the product. Here we can locate the product that we want to check the valued inventory, the period or the date range. We indicate a preview, and we will find all the information related or necessary for the perpetual inventory record. Here type purchase, the number, the input output, ending balance, and so on. We will also be able to visualize the book of attraction or the attraction report. And we're also going to be able to, our location has what would be the PLE, the electronic ledger program. We start with the purchase ledger. We can visualize it. Detailed purchases, set up the different filters. We're going to indicate a preview, and we can visualize the purchase ledger with all the necessary or required information. We will also find the detailed sales ledger, detailed, with its filters and all the required information. Sales ledger, document type, faces, VAT amount, group, customers, and so on. Also the ledger, we are going to place ledger, and we indicate a preview. We can find the general ledger. We will also be able to visualize the journal, a preview, and see all the information of the journal. And view all the information of the journal. We are going to find also the fixed assets journal. We can filter it, type fixed assets, a start date, an end date, and other filters. We are going to indicate a preview and start the report generation from assets report. assets report. Here we can visualize each one of the fixed assets. The print type view appears. We can also filter or send this document, this report, Excel document type. Done with all this information. Now we can also visualize what would be the details of bank accounts, account details, and we will have filters by bank and by bank account. A preview, and we can visualize all the information related to bank movements. We will also find the cash book and bank, which would be all the movements of the cash register. We will indicate a filter by account, a filter by date range. Let's specify a preview, and we can visualize all the information related to cash movements. Ready, we can visualize it. I invite you to visit our webpage, where you will not only find information of the Peru location, but also of the different locations we handle, such as Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama, Puerto Rico, among others. With all the information, a general demo of what would be the localization, we can download the brochure of the localization with each one of the fiscal requirements. The brochure explained, and that we handle in our location. You can also view our product information, LLB retail, all the information related to the product. You can also be attentive to our calendar of trainings and events such as webinars that we do weekly. I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, and stay up to date with the information that we put out daily in these social networks. Thanks for your attention, and see you in a future video.